On November 18, 2025, the U.S. news website Axios reported that the White House is working with Russia to secretly draft a new peace plan for Ukraine. Following this report, various media outlets also covered the topic. This article is from Reuters on November 19, but according to Axios's report, the plan is described as a 28-point roadmap. According to the new plan, the U.S. and other countries will recognize Crimea and Donbas as legitimate Russian territory, reducing Ukraine's armed forces by 50%, and no missiles on Ukrainian territory. Other conditions include recognizing Russian as the official state language in Ukraine, and granting official status to the Russian Orthodox Church, the Financial Times reports. The fact that this information was leaked prior to the official announcement sparked various speculations and criticisms.
There have been reports that President Zelensky said, he's looking to look at the plan, that there's been reports about the Trump administration proposing a plan. Can you just give an update on where Russia-Ukraine stands, and does the president plan to speak with Zelensky anytime soon, or when can you expect that?
So I'm happy to provide an update. I've seen quite a bit of reporting on the latest with Russia-Ukraine, so let me clarify and give you guys the truth on where it currently stands. President Trump has made it very clear since day one, and even on the campaign trail, that he wants to see this war come to an end. He's grown increasingly frustrated with both sides of this war, Russia and Ukraine alike, for their refusal to commit to a peace agreement. But nevertheless, the president and his national security team are steadfast in seeing this war come to an end, to end the killing and deliver on the president's promise. Special Envoy Witkoff, Marco Rubio, have been working on a plan quietly for about the last month. They've been engaging with both sides, Russia and Ukraine, equally to understand what these countries would commit to in order to see a lasting and durable peace. That's how you get to a peace negotiation, right? That's how it worked with Israel, with respect to Israel and Gaza and all of the Arab countries in the Middle East. That's how we accomplished that historic agreement, which the UN, by the way, voted to commit to and accept this week, which was a huge monumental moment. So they have been engaged with both sides, and these talks are continuing. As always, I'm not going to litigate the details of this plan as it's ongoing and it's in flux, but the president supports this plan. It's a good plan for both Russia and Ukraine, and we believe that it should be acceptable to both sides, and we're working very hard to get it done. And I'll also add, I know Secretary Driscoll did meet with President Zelensky today. We spoke with him. He was very optimistic following that meeting. And so, again, we are having good conversations with both sides with respect to ending this war.
You said this is a good plan. So according to our sources, this proposal demands major concessions from Ukraine and doesn't demand much from Russia. So was Russia involved in drafting
Your
this?
understanding is wrong. Have you read the full plan? You haven't.
Sources say.
Yes.
So if you can give details,
You've read reporting from one side of the war, and so I want you to understand that the administration has talked equally with both sides. You have seen President Trump engage directly with both President Putin and President Zelensky. Likewise, his national security team has as well. In fact, Special Envoy Witkoff and Secretary Rubio met with some of the Ukrainians just in the past week to discuss this very plan. And so just like you saw with respect to Israel and Gaza, we are hearing out both sides of this war to understand what can you commit to end the war. And that's ultimately how we are going to get to an agreeable solution. That's what the president has directed of his team. I know there's a lot of criticism out there and a lot of doubters, but I would just remind you of the historic success that this president and his team accomplished in the Middle East. We believe that is possible with Russia and Ukraine, and we're hoping and working very hard to achieve that.
Caroline, there are reports that Qatar is acting as a mediator in the Ukraine peace process. Can you confirm that, and why did the president choose that country?
I'm not going to get into further details other than what I previously shared, which I think was quite a bit of information.
As spokesperson Levitt stated, this is a peace proposal drafted by the United States based on discussions with both the Russian and Ukrainian sides. It is not something agreed upon through U.S.-Russia negotiations, as if it were a scoop. The Russian side has not received any documents. Spokesperson Peskov also stated that they are only seeing it in the news, just like us. These leaks to the media are actually intentionally directed at specific news outlets. This time, we'd like to take a closer look at how this works. On October 20, 2025, the Financial Times published an article like this. Donald Trump urged Volodymyr Zelensky to accept Putin's terms or be destroyed by Russia. U.S. President tossed aside maps of Ukraine front line in volatile White House meeting.
Thank you, everybody.
This report details the private meeting between Trump and Zelensky on October 17th, held away from the press. Who on earth leaked details of what happened behind closed doors? This could be considered a breach of diplomatic etiquette. Ukraine, or Europe after hearing from Zelensky, or maybe. In the interview with Prime Minister Orbán, on October 17th that you just saw, he made the following remarks.
Mikor, hogyan és kitől tudta meg, hogy Budapest lesz a helyszín?
Beszéltem tegnap este az amerikai elnökkel telefonon, de valahogy előtte a hír már kiszivárgott. Tudtam, hogy későn érek, hazaszóltam is a feleségemnek, hogy ne várjon. És így este hosszabban beszéltem az elnökkel, és beszéltünk az oroszokkal is, és Putyin elnök úrral pedig ma reggel, ma délelőtt során fogok majd beszélni.
Zelensky was informed of the contents of the October 16th phone call between President Trump and President Putin, while en route to Washington. So, who leaked it beforehand? On October 21, 2025, an article in the Financial Times stated, Trump-Putin summit in Budapest unsettles Europe. Volodymyr Zelensky objects to Hungary's pro-Russian leader hosting meeting aimed at ending Moscow's invasion.
Our next guest has served as Hungary's foreign minister since 2014. After earlier service as deputy minister and state secretary for foreign relations, he helped build Hungary's Eastern opening policy and has represented his country in talks with both NATO and Russia. Peter Ziarto joins us in studio. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good evening. Thank you for the invitation.
So what are your initial reactions to some of the bigger narratives around this very high-profile talk that could take place? The big criticism is Hungary is way too friendly with Moscow and therefore this should not take place at all.
Well, we are definitely not swimming with the current in Europe. Europe is suffering from a war psyche, actually. So if you have a look at the statements and comments of the European politicians, you see that they are representing a pro-war approach. We Hungarians have been standing up for peace for the last 3.5 years. We have not been delivering weapons to Ukraine. We have not been sending money to Ukraine. We have kept our channels of communication open with Russia because what we think is that a war cannot end on the battlefield. A war can only end around the negotiating table. And if there are no negotiations, peace will not come. And then the bloodshed will be continued. So for the last 3.5 years, we have been standing up for peace talks, ceasefire, peace agreement. And of course, for this, we have been always stigmatized and labeled by the European liberal mainstream as pro-Putin, pro-Russian, spy, propagandist of Kremlin, whatever. But I have to tell you that because of our very positive approach and friendly relations with President Trump, we have been stigmatized and labeled by the Europeans as well, you know.
I can imagine. What surprises me about the official response to the proposition that a peace talk could take place between Putin, Zelensky, and Trump, you have countries like Poland standing up. The Polish foreign minister has warned that if Putin's plane flies through Polish territory, they may force it to ground and they may arrest Vladimir Putin. They're not the only ones. Other European Union nations have threatened the same. And my question to you is why that just seems very dramatic. Yeah. And it also seems to be getting in the way of peace talks.
Yeah, look, they are all pro-war politicians. The Polish foreign minister is one of the most pro-war politicians of Europe. And most of the Western European politicians are pro-war politicians as well. They have been carrying out a political strategy which is undermining the peace efforts of President Trump. We were really crossing fingers for President Trump winning the presidential elections here in the United States, we Hungarians, I mean. And we were super happy with him winning because we understood that he has been and he is still the only hope for peace. No other politician in the world could make this war coming to an end, only President Trump. And if the European politicians had not undermined his peace efforts, peace might have come already back to the central and eastern part of Europe. But unfortunately, the Western European politicians are counter-interested. They are counter-interested. They are making efforts and making decisions which are always deepening the conflict and which come forward with a huge risk of escalation. We are living in the neighborhood. And our interest is peace to come as soon as possible. And we all know that President Trump is the only hope. So had the Europeans European politicians, I mean, supported President Trump in his peace efforts, those efforts might have already been successful. So I'm absolutely not surprised of these, because of these positions and statements of my fellow colleagues in Europe.
You know, but again, it reminds us of that instance when Zelensky and Putin were close to having a peace talk, and then you had the Prime Minister of the UK step in, Boris Johnson, and say you cannot have these talks, you cannot give these concessions, and they actively blocked those peace talks and set back the whole effort by years. This feels like another one of those moments where you have neighboring countries saying, we won't let the Russian delegation fly through our airspace to have these peace talks.
Look, since the statement by President Trump has been made that there will be a peace summit between President Trump and President Putin in Budapest, many European politicians are making their best in order to prevent this from happening. They have two problems, I think. One problem of them is Budapest, because now it is being proved that it's not Hungary which would be isolated, but it is the European Union.
And the next day, on October 22nd, the Financial Times published this article. Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin cancel Budapest summit over Ukraine. White House announces two leaders have no plans to meet to discuss ways to end the war. In response, Russian Special Envoy Kirill Dmitriev posted the following on X. Media is twisting comment about the immediate future to undercut the upcoming summit. Preparation continue.
Mr. President, the meeting with Vladimir Putin is canceled or put on hold. Do you know what happened there, and does that affect your decision whether or not to send Tomahawks?
No, I don't want to have a wasted meeting. I don't want to have a waste of time, so I'll see what happens. But we did all of these great deals, great peace deals. They're all peace deals. They're agreements, solid agreements, every one of them. But this one, and I said, go to the line of battle, the battlefield lines, and you pull back and you go home, and everybody take some time off, because you got two countries that are killing each other. Two countries are losing 5,000 to 7,000 soldiers a week. So we'll see what happens. We haven't made a determination.
What changed your mind after talking to Vladimir Putin between then and now? Why did you think that a Budapest summit might be wasted time?
Well, I didn't say anything. I didn't say it would, and you never know what's going to happen. But a lot of things are happening on that front, on the war front with Ukraine and Russia, and we'll be notifying you over the next 2 days as to what we're doing.
Did you hear
a lot of things are happening.
Did you hear something?
On this day, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte visited the White House. During his meeting with President Trump, a reporter asked the following question.
In the back.
Thank you, Mr. President. Liam Cosgrove with Zero. My question is actually for the Secretary General.
Yes.
Mr. Secretary, I don't know if you've seen this, but polling out of Ukraine shows a massive collapse in Ukrainian support for the war. A Gallup poll had it just 23%. That's less than a quarter. Zelensky came out today praising President Trump's proposal for freezing the front lines of battle as part of a ceasefire. He said that's a good compromise. So people view your coming here as, you're lobbying the U.S. government to continue its involvement in the war. You're obviously lobbying for more NATO weapons to be sent to Ukraine, but Ukrainians themselves don't want to fight the war. So how do you justify that morally?
Well, I'm lobbying only for one thing, and that is to make sure that we end this war. And I don't have to lobby the president, because we totally agree on this. And this is what he has been doing from day one. Everything he could do to break the deadlock with Putin, get a dialogue going, dialoguing also with Zelensky, and getting this war done. It's crucial. And the fact that the US is now supplying weapons into Ukraine, paid for by allies, is extremely important. And that's now happening since 2-3 months. About 2 billion moving into Ukraine.
The war hasn't wind down. Why do you think that'll wind it down now?
What do you mean?
You think more weapons will wind down the war?
No, I mean, there's more to be done. So what you need, what the president said this weekend, stop where you are, so basically do a ceasefire and then have all your discussions about territory and whatever. But first stop the war. This is what you said on Friday and on Sunday.
It's a war. I mean, your question's really a fair one. It's a war that should have never started. And you know how I feel about it. But it's a war that should have never started. And we're not selling any weapons to Ukraine. We're selling them to NATO.
Yeah.
Which is different from before. With Biden, he just gave $350 billion worth of weapons and cash right into Ukraine, and that was so foolish. But we sell them to NATO, and in theory, you can do what you want with them. It doesn't have to be Ukraine, but probably it is mostly.
No, what nations are doing now is buying from this program and making sure that the supply is in Ukraine, so Europeans and Canadians. And for example, these are interceptors for the Patriot systems, crucial to protect the cities. Today, again, a Russian attack has killed children, at least seriously wounded children in kindergarten in Ukraine. So we need to make sure that the air defense systems are in place, and we need the US systems to do that, and the Europeans are paying for that. And this is exactly the type of actions we needed, and the President is doing that and trying everything to get this war to an end, starting with the ceasefire.
Do you still believe that Putin wants to take all of Ukraine?
I always felt that way. I always felt he wanted to. When I was in my first term, I was I was very close to him, relatively speaking. It was harder because of the Russia hoax. But I would talk to President Putin about Ukraine, and it was the apple of his eye. I'd say it was the apple of his eye, but it would have never happened. He knew the consequences were too great. When we had a rigged election and all of a sudden I wasn't there, he said, wow. I think he looked at Afghanistan, how horribly that was handled, so stupidly. And I think that really gave him a little additional, incentive. I always felt he wanted the whole thing, not a piece of it. But I think now he's willing to negotiate a little bit further, and I think he's willing to make a deal. We'll see. We don't want him. We don't want him to have the whole thing.
Mr. President.
On October 25th, the Financial Times reported the following about President Trump. Trump and Ukraine, tracking the U.S. president's shifting signals. Donald Trump's stance has swung sharply between pro-Russia and pro-Kiev over the past year. And on October 31st, the Financial Times published a scoop article. Donald Trump-Vladimir Putin Budapest summit axed following Moscow memo. Russian Foreign Ministry's maximalist demands for ending Ukraine war led U.S. to scrap plan meeting. This was also reported by Reuters on the same day. October 31st, the United States canceled a planned Budapest summit between President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin, following Russia's firm stance on hardline demands regarding Ukraine, the Financial Times reported on Friday. The decision came after a tense call between the two countries' top diplomats, the Financial Times said, citing people familiar with the matter. And finally, Reuters added this. Reuters could not immediately verify the FT report. The White House did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Officials in the Russian government were not immediately available for comment. Once, Tucker Carlson said this in his first message after leaving Fox.
At the most basic level, the news you consume is a lie of the stealthiest and most insidious kind. Facts have been withheld on purpose, along with proportion and perspective. You are being manipulated.
Let me give you an example. This is an article from the Financial Times, dated September 1, 2025. Ursula von der Leyen's plane hit by suspected Russian GPS interference. Officials suspect jamming operation forced jet carrying European Commission president to land in Bulgaria using paper maps. Major Western media outlets reported this news simultaneously. However, on the following day, September 2nd, Anadolu Agency reported as follows. No investigation into disruption of GPS on von der Leyen plane, says Bulgaria's premier. This interference is not targeted at one or another aviation object. Such things happen daily, says Rosen Zelyazkov. Bulgaria's air traffic management acted according to protocol, he said. Western mainstream media did not report on this until September 4th. Instead, this news was reported. Bulgaria's Prime Minister orders further investigation into von der Leyen's flight. However, please watch the journalist's question to the European Commission on September 4th.
Hello, Thomas Muller-Nilsson at Euractiv. I have a question about the GPS or alleged GPS cyber attack on Sunday. So on Monday, you said that you received information from the Bulgarian authorities that this was due to a blatant Russian interference. I was wondering, have the Bulgarian authorities shared with you the evidence for this? And I asked this because the Bulgarian Prime Minister said on Tuesday that they won't be investigating the situation, and he downplayed the significance of the attack. He said, look, this kind of thing happens all the time on eastern frontline states. So I was wondering if you had any comment on that. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Of course, it's for the Bulgarian authorities to decide how to take course of this action. What I can say is that I can confirm that there was GPS interference. Of course, what matters most is that the plane landed safely, and this is the key outcome of this episode. The radio interference was confirmed by the Bulgarian Air Traffic Service Authority, and I can quote a press release from their side. I believe that Paula already quoted on Tuesday, but if useful, I don't mind recalling, of course. Their press release said, during European Commission President von der Leyen's flights to Plovdiv, the satellite signal providing data to the aircraft GPS navigation system was disrupted. While approaching Plovdiv airport, the GPS signal disappeared. To ensure flight safety, air traffic control immediately purposed an alternative landing approach using ground-based navigation systems. So, of course, as I was saying, the landing occurred in safety, and this is the most important. Also, on the last point you mentioned, we absolutely agree. We are very well aware that, unfortunately, this incident is not specific to the president, meaning that it occurs on a very regular basis to many aircrafts flying, in particular next to our eastern border. The situation is complicated. It's a fact that since the start of the war, Russia's war of aggression in Ukraine, these episodes have been increasing, these episodes of disturbances of GNSS GPS signals, and therefore this is why a coordinated action from the European Union is needed. The Commission is supporting Member States in developing an EU-wide action plan with clear roles and responsibilities across sectors and levels, because we are very well aware that this is an issue occurring very regularly to our aircrafts, but also to our ships at times. And of course, this is a difficult situation to handle.
So you're taking the matter forward about GPS, non-existent GPS interference you're taking a matter forward for something that essentially did not happen now, and the fact that it's not happened is quite a thing to note, since NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte yesterday said he's treating it as a serious security threat. Donald Trump, the US president, commented on it, and the Commission is now not going to investigate itself into the matter.
Thanks. First, we don't have this investigative powers, I believe. I feel we're going a bit in circles, so I'm not really sure what the value added is. You're saying something that has not happened. I'm telling you there was GPS interference. I quoted a Bulgarian authority press release confirming the GPS interference, and I'm telling you that, of course, we're taking action not in relation to this specific incident, which has occurred, but is one of the many. So we are taking action because it is an issue that our citizens are facing on a regular basis when flying, especially near the eastern border of Europe. The member states concerned are very well aware of the issue.
President Trump's comments on this matter were very brief.
We talked about controlling the sky. On Sunday, the satellite signal of Ursula von der Leyen's plane was alleged.
With Ursula? Well, she had an interesting event. She's a tremendous woman. And so what are you asking me about her?
NATO is concerned about it, about this.
True, NATO is concerned about it. Well, nobody knows where it came from, but they did take away her ability to use a phone. You know, sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes that could happen to me. I'd be very happy.
Mr. President. The Financial Times has not issued any corrections or amendments to its article on this matter. There are numerous such examples. On November 10, 2025, Ukraine's National Anti-Corruption Bureau and the Specialized Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office uncovered a large-scale corruption scheme within Ukraine's energy sector. Western media widely reported that this scheme involved embezzlement and money laundering amounting to at least $100 million. Corruption issues within the Zelensky administration have been covered before, but the media always reports that Zelensky himself was not directly involved. Zelensky has acted accordingly. He has managed to get through by dismissing or accepting the resignations of ministers whose names came up, but, this time, that might not be enough. I would like to reiterate this point.
About this Ukraine plan. President Zelensky said today that his country would risk either giving up a partner or giving up its dignity. There's been criticism that this deal proposal...
He doesn't like it?
It's unclear. He was sort of tenuous about it.
He'll have to like it, and if he doesn't like it, then, they should just keep fighting, I guess,
The suggestion that he made, though, was that if he doesn't accept it, that the U.S. would pull back its support for Ukraine. Is that
Well, at some
accurate?
point he's going to have to accept something. He hasn't accepted. You remember right in the Oval Office not so long ago, I said, you don't have the cards. Don't forget, I inherited this war. This war never would have happened. I inherited this war. And I thought he should have made a deal a year ago, 2 years ago. The ultimate deal would have been if it never started. That would have been the good deal. That could have been done too if you had the right president, but you didn't have the right president.
Mr. President. President Trump reminded reporters of his February meeting with Zelensky.
You're right now not in a very good position. You've allowed yourself to be in a very bad position, and he happens to be right about it.
From the very beginning of the war.
You're not in a good position. You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having cards. But right now, you don't. You're playing cards. You're playing cards. You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III.
In April, during a meeting with El Salvador President Nayib Bukele, he responded to a reporter's question as follows.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. You repeatedly mentioned last night that Russia's attack on Ukraine was a mistake. What is the exact mistake? And have you given Putin a deadline to actually move toward a ceasefire?
The mistake was letting the war happen. If Biden were competent, and if Zelensky were competent, and I don't know that he is, we had a rough session with this guy over here. He just kept asking for more and more. That war should have never been allowed to happen. That war, I went 4 years and Putin wouldn't even bring it up. And as soon as the election was rigged and I wasn't here, that war started. There was no way that war should have been allowed to happen. And Biden should have stopped it. And you take a look at Putin. I'm not saying anybody's an angel, but I will tell you, I went 4 years and it wasn't even a question. He would never, and I told him, don't do it. You're not going to do it. And it was the apple of his eye, but there was no way that he would have done it. All you had to do is lower oil prices. If you lowered oil prices, Biden kept the prices so high because he made it impossible to get it. If you lowered oil prices, you would have never had the war. But you wouldn't have had it with me anyway. That war would have never happened. And I think it's a great abuse. So now what do? You get a country where 25% of its land is gone, and the best locations, where millions of people are killed. You haven't reported accurately the death. And this was Biden's war, and I'm trying to stop it. And I think we're going to do a good job. I hope we're going to do it. They lose 2,500 young people a week, on average. Now they're Russians and they're Ukrainians, but it's 2,000. We don't care. It's like whatever it is. They're not from your country. They're not from mine. But I want to stop it. 2,500. It's a killing field. It's like the Civil War. You take a look. I look at the satellite pictures. This should not be happening in our time. Of course, our time can be pretty violent, as we know. But that's a war that should have never been allowed to start. And Biden could have stopped it, and Zelensky could have stopped it, and Putin should have never started it. Everybody's to blame.
Have you spoken to President Zelensky, sir, about his offer to purchase more Patriot missile batteries?
Oh, I don't know. He's always looking to purchase missiles. He's against. Listen, when you start a war, you got to know that you can win the war. Right? You don't start a war against somebody that's 20 times your size, and then hope that people give you some missiles.
On November 23, President Trump posted the following on Truth Social. The war between Russia and Ukraine is a violent and terrible one that, with strong and proper U.S. and Ukrainian leadership, would have never happened. It began long before I took office for second term, during the sleepy Joe Biden administration, and has only gotten worse. If the 2020 presidential election was not rigged and stolen, the only thing radical left Democrats are good doing, there would be no Ukraine-Russia war, as there wasn't, not even a mention, during my first term in office. Putin would never have attacked. It was only when he saw Sleepy Joe in action that he said, "Now is my chance." The rest is history, and so it continues. I inherited a war that should have never happened. A war that is a loser for everyone, especially the millions of people that have so needlessly died. Ukraine leadership has expressed zero gratitude for our efforts, and Europe continues to buy oil from Russia. The USA continues to sell massive dollar amount of weapons to NATO, for distribution to Ukraine. Crooked Joe gave everything. Free, 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 including big money. God bless all the lives that have been lost in the human catastrophe. On November 28, Andrei Yermak, Zelensky's chief of staff, resigned after his home was searched. Yermak negotiated with U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio in Geneva, and reportedly succeeded in incorporating several favorable conditions for Ukraine into the peace plan drafted by the United States. As Zelensky gradually consolidated power, Yermak came to be widely regarded as Ukraine's second most powerful figure. He is reported to have shaped foreign policy, eliminated political rivals, and even wielded decision-making authority on the battlefield. Yermak has resigned but maintains his innocence regarding the corruption allegations. He has not been indicted at this time. And, as usual, the mainstream media is reporting as if Zelensky has no involvement in corruption.